He slammed his phone face down on the cafe table so hard the coffee jumped in the cup. Nathan Cole, 34, Navy, a father raising his little girl alone, had just been stood up. Again. One text, 10 words. Something came up. Sorry, maybe another time. That was it. 8 years of holding his family together with 2 hands and a paycheck, and this was what the world offered back. He stood to leave. And that's when a woman worth $9 billion walked straight to his table and asked to sit down. Why would she choose him? Stay till the end and you'll understand everything. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from tonight? I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and let's begin. The text came in at 7:42 p.m. Nathan Cole read it twice because the first time his brain refused to accept that 10 words could undo 2 weeks of quiet, embarrassing hope. Something came up. Sorry, maybe another time. Rachel. He set the phone down, picked it up, set it down again. Somewhere in his chest, a muscle he didn't have a name for pulled tight and let go, tired of pulling. Can I get you anything else, sir? The waitress was young, maybe 22, with a pencil behind her ear and the practiced brightness of someone who'd learned to smile through a double shift. Nathan looked up at her and made himself return it because his mother had raised him to be kind to people who were working no matter how his own night was going. Just the check when you get a chance, he said. You sure kitchen's still open? We've got a meatloaf special that'll fix just about anything. He almost laughed. Does it fix getting stood up? She winced, sympathetic. That bad, huh? That bad. He tapped the phone. Blind date. My buddy set it up. Swore up and down she was, quote, perfect for me. He shrugged. Guess perfect had somewhere better to be. Her loss, the waitress said, and she said it like she meant it, and Nathan appreciated that more than she'd ever know. I'll bring the check. But the coffee's on me. You look like a man who could use one more. She was gone before he could argue. Nathan leaned back in the booth and let out a long breath through his nose. This was the part nobody warned you about. Not the divorce everybody warns you about, the divorce. Not the custody paperwork, not the empty side of the bed, not the way an 8-year-old's questions could cut you off at the knees. What nobody told you was the loneliness that came after you thought you'd already survived the loneliness. The slow kind. The kind that showed up on a Tuesday night in a cafe you'd worn your one good shirt to. He looked down at that shirt, now light blue, ironed twice the collar he'd smoothed flat in the truck mirror before walking in. He'd shaved. He'd put on the cologne Lily had given him for Father's Day, the cheap drugstore bottle she'd picked out with her own allowance money, so proud of herself she couldn't stop grinning. Now you smell fancy, Daddy. He'd gotten dressed up to sit alone at a table for 2. Nathan pulled out his phone again, and this time he called someone. Talk to me, came the voice on the other end. Daniel, loud, warm, and about to get an earful. She bailed. There was a pause. No. 10 minutes before. Text message. Something came up. That okay, that's on me. That's completely on me. Daniel exhaled. Nate, I swear she was into it. We talked yesterday. She asked what you looked like. I told her, she said, Danny. Nathan rubbed the bridge of his nose. It's fine. It's not fine, you got dressed up. How'd you know I got dressed up? Because you always get dressed up, Daniel said. That's the whole thing about you, man. You show up. Every single time. You show up ironed and early and hopeful, and the world keeps not showing up back, and I'm sick of watching it. Nathan didn't have an answer for that. Because it was true, and because it was the kind of true that stung more coming from a friend than from an enemy. I'm gonna go home, Nathan said. Relieve the sitter, read Lily a chapter. Call it a night. Nate. It's fine, Danny. Really. One more shot. Let me set up one more. No more setups. He said it gently, but he meant it like a door closing. I appreciate you. I do. But I think I'm done with this part. Some guys just aren't built for it, and that's okay. I got Lily. I got the Navy. That's a full life. That's more than a lot of men get. That's not a full life. That's a duty roster. The words landed harder than Daniel probably intended. Nathan stared at the 2 empty sugar packets he'd been folding and unfolding without realizing it. "I gotta go," Nathan said. "Nate. Night, Danny." He hung up before his friend could say the thing they both knew he was about to say. Because Daniel had known him since they were 19, since basic, since before the marriage, and the deployment, and the divorce, and Daniel was the only person on earth allowed to tell Nathan Cole that he was lonely. Nathan looked around the cafe for the waitress and his check. That's when the door opened. He noticed the woman, the way you notice a change in the weather, not by looking, but by feeling the room shift. Conversations near the front paused for half a second. A busboy stopped mid-stride. She walked in out of the cold in a long charcoal coat that had cost more than Nathan's truck payment, though he didn't know that yet, and she moved like someone who had never in her life waited for a table. She was, he'd realize later, the most composed person he had ever seen come apart. Because right now, standing just inside the door, this woman with the expensive coat and the perfect posture was staring at her phone with an expression Nathan recognized instantly. He recognized it because he was wearing the same one. She'd been stood up too. He watched her read whatever was on that screen, watched her jaw tighten, watched her slide the phone into her coat pocket with a slowness that was its own kind of fury, the controlled kind, the kind that costs more than shouting. She scanned the room. Every table was full except the 2 tops by the window, one of which had a single Navy man sitting at it in his ironed blue shirt, coffee going cold, a check he was still waiting for. Their eyes met. Nathan looked away, first out of habit, out of the reflex of a man who'd learned not to stare. He figured she'd find the hostess wait for a table, ignore him entirely, like people like her, whoever she was, ignored people like him. Instead, footsteps. They stopped at his table. "Is this seat taken?" Nathan looked up. Up close, she was older than the coat suggested. Early 40s maybe, with dark hair pulled back tight, and eyes that were the gray of a sky that hadn't decided whether to rain. There was gray at her temples she hadn't bothered to hide, and Nathan found he liked that about her before he knew a single other thing. He glanced at the empty chair across from him, the chair that had been waiting all evening for a woman who never came. No, it's not taken." "May I?" "It's a free country," Nathan said, and then immediately felt like an idiot, because who says that? But the corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile. The distant relative of a smile. She pulled out the chair and sat coat and all, and set a small clutch on the table with the precision of someone setting down a chess piece. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The waitress appeared, order pad already out, took one look at the newcomer, and her whole posture changed, straighter, more careful. "Can I get you something to drink, ma'am?" "Coffee, black, and whatever he's having, put it on my—" "No," Nathan said quick. "No, you don't have to do that." The woman turned those gray eyes on him. "I didn't ask if I had to." "I've got it," Nathan said. "I invited myself to sit at my own table. It seems only right I pay for it." And there it was, a real one. Just a flicker. The smile got a little closer to arriving. "Fair enough," she said. To the waitress, "Just the coffee. Thank you." The waitress left. Silence again. Nathan folded his sugar packet. "You're going to ruin that," the woman observed. "Sorry." The sugar packet. "You've folded it into eighths. One more and it tears." Nathan looked down. He unfolded it, set it flat, put his hands in his lap like a scolded kid. "Nervous habit." "What are you nervous about?" "Beautiful woman just sat down across from me who I'm pretty sure could buy this whole cafe and everyone in it. That's a lot of pressure for a Tuesday." She studied him for a long moment. He couldn't read her at all, and he was usually good at reading people the Navy taught you. That taught you to know in 3 seconds whether the man across from you was steady or about to break. But this woman gave him nothing. A locked door. A vault. "You were stood up," she said. It wasn't a question. "What gave it away?" "You're dressed for something you're not doing anymore." She nodded at his collar. "Ironed shirt. You shaved. There's a spot you missed just under the jaw, which means you were rushing, which means it mattered to you." And you've been sitting alone at a two-person table for... She glanced at the coffee. At least 20 minutes, judging by that. Nathan blinked. You do this professionally? In a manner of speaking. She let the vault stay closed. And I'd know the look anywhere tonight, because I'm wearing it too. The guy who didn't show up, Nathan said carefully, told me he'd lost track of time. She said it flatly, but Nathan heard everything underneath it. As if my time were something a person could simply misplace. As if I hadn't cleared an evening I do not have to spare. That's a garbage thing to do, Nathan said. For what it's worth. And you... What was your excuse? Something came up. He pulled out his phone, showed her the screen. She read it, and something in her face softened by 1 degree the way ice softens before it melts. You can't see it, but you know it's happening. 10 words, she said. 10 words. Mine used 42. I counted. She almost smiled again. Somehow yours is worse. 10 words means she didn't even try. Yeah, well... Nathan turned the phone over so he didn't have to look at it. I think I'm out of the trying business anyway. This was my buddy talked me into it. I don't do this. The dating thing. Why not? And there it was. The question he'd been dodging all night. The question Daniel kept asking, the question Lily asked in her own quiet child's way when she watched him come home alone. He looked at this stranger, this woman he'd never see again after tonight, and something about that, the safety of a stranger, the freedom of a person who owed you nothing and expected nothing, loosened his tongue. Because I've got an 8-year-old daughter who's already watched one person walk out of her life, Nathan said. And every time I even think about letting someone new in, all I can picture is her at the front door, watching another one leave. And I'd rather be lonely for the rest of my life than do that to her one more time. The woman went very still. The waitress set down the coffee, black steam rising off it, and neither of them touched it. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in a year, the woman said finally. Sorry. I don't usually dump all that on... Don't apologize. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup, but didn't drink. Do you know how rare it is to sit across from a person who says a true thing without calculating what it'll get them? She shook her head slowly. Everyone I talk to wants something. Every single person. They smile at me, and I can watch the math happening behind their eyes. What can I get from her? How do I stay useful to her? You... She looked at him. You don't want anything from me. I don't even know who you are, Nathan pointed out. Exactly. I'm Nathan, he said, and put out his hand across the table. Nathan Cole. She looked at his hand. For a strange, suspended second, he thought she wouldn't take it that she'd remembered who she was and what he was, and pulled back into the vault. Then she took it. Her handshake was firm, dry, brief. A businessman's handshake in a woman's hand. Evelyn, she said. Evelyn what? Just Evelyn, for tonight. She held his gaze. Is that all right? Just for tonight, I'd like to be a woman who was stood up in a cafe. Not a small, tight gesture at herself, the coat, the whole apparatus of whoever she really was, not the rest of it. Nathan didn't understand yet what the rest of it meant. But he understood the wanting behind it. He understood better than almost anyone alive the desire to be just for 1 hour, simply a person and not a role. Evelyn, he said, nice to meet you, rough night. And this time, finally, she smiled all the way. It changed her whole face. It made her look 10 years younger and about 1,000 years more tired at the same time. You have no idea, she said. They talked. Nathan couldn't have told you afterward how the next hour disappeared. It went the way good conversations go. One thing led to another. A joke unlocked a story unlocked a confession, and the 2 coffees went cold and got replaced, and went cold again, while a Navy single father and a woman named Just Evelyn leaned across a 2-person table and forgot the rest of the world was in the room. She asked about Lily. Nathan didn't usually talk about Lily to strangers. Lily was the most precious thing he had, and you don't hand precious things to people you don't know. But something about the way Evelyn asked made it different. She didn't ask the way people usually ask, the polite way, the "and do you have kids" way. That's really just waiting for its turn to speak. She asked like she wanted the answer. "She's 8, Nathan said. "Going on 40. She reads 3 grade levels up and she thinks I don't know she stays up past lights out with a flashlight. She's got," he laughed, "she's got this thing where she organizes her stuffed animals by height every single night, tallest to shortest. And if I put one back in the wrong spot, she notices, every time. She sounds like a person who likes order in a world that hasn't given her much." Nathan's smile faltered. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, that's exactly it, actually." Her mother left when Lily was 5. He turned his cup a quarter turn on the table. Wasn't a fight, wasn't dramatic. She just decided this wasn't the life she wanted. And I get it in a way. Military spouse deployments, never enough money, a kid who needed everything. It's a lot. It broke a lot of marriages, ours included. He paused. "But you don't get to unchoose a kid. That's the part I can't." She calls twice a year, birthday and Christmas. Lily lights up like the 4th of July for about 10 minutes, and then she's got that dead phone in her hand, and I'm the one who... He stopped. "You're the one who's there," Evelyn finished. "I'm the one who's there." "That's not nothing, Nathan. Feels like nothing some days. Feels like..." He shook his head. "You do everything right. You show up, you provide, you never miss a school play. You learn to braid hair off a YouTube video at midnight because she's got picture day, and I'll be damned if my kid's going to picture day looking like nobody loves her. And it's still not enough because there's a hole shaped like her mother, and I can't fill it no matter how many braids I learn." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "You learn to braid hair," she said, "off a video, at midnight." "Terrible at it. First month she looked like she'd been in a windstorm." "That," Evelyn said, "is the most impressive thing I've heard all year. And I hear a great many impressive things." Nathan felt his ears go warm. "It's just being a dad." "No." Her voice had an edge now, something fierce under the calm. "It's not just anything. Do you know how many men I know who would drive their own child to a nanny and consider that fatherhood? You sat down at midnight and you learned a skill because your daughter's dignity mattered to you. Don't you dare call that just being a dad." The intensity of it surprised him. It surprised her too. He thought she leaned back, as if she'd revealed more than she meant to. "Your turn," Nathan said, gently steering them off him. "What do you do, Evelyn, for a living, I mean? Or is that part of the rest of it?" She turned her cup a quarter turn. He noticed she'd picked up his habit. "I run a company," she said. "Yeah. What kind?" "The kind that eats your entire life," she said. "The kind where you look up one day and you're 43 years old, and you have a corner office with a view of 3 states, and no one who'll call you just to see how your day was." She said it lightly. It didn't land lightly. "I built it myself, if that means anything. Started with nothing. No family money, no connections. Just me and an idea and a willingness to outwork every man who told me I couldn't. That's something to be proud of." "Is it?" She looked out the window. "I've spent 20 years being proud of it. And tonight I got stood up by a man I didn't even like, and I found myself thinking I would trade a very large portion of it, to have what you have." "What I have," Nathan repeated. "Lady, I make $41,000 a year, and I've got a truck with 190,000 miles on it. You have a person," Evelyn said, "who organizes her stuffed animals by height and notices when you get it wrong. You have a person who will remember you learned to braid her hair. When you are old, someone will hold your hand." She met his eyes. "Do you have any idea how much money that's worth? Because I've done the math. I do math for a living. And I promise you, Nathan, there is not enough money in the world." The cafe had emptied out around them without either of them noticing. The waitress was wiping down tables, throwing the occasional glance their way, not to hurry them, but Nathan thought almost like she was rooting for them. "I don't believe you," Nathan said. "Believe what? That you'd trade it. People say that. Oh, money doesn't matter, I'd give it all up. But they never do. Because it's easy to say and impossible to do. He shrugged. No offense. I've heard rich folks get sentimental about being poor, and it always rings a little hollow to a guy who's actually rationing groceries the week before payday. He expected her to be offended, braced for it even he'd been blunter than he meant to be. Instead, she laughed, a real laugh, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she could stop it. You're absolutely right, she said. It's easy to say, and you have no reason to believe me. She leaned forward. So, let me say something I can prove. I've had dinner with senators, with men who own football teams, with people whose names you'd know, and not one of them has ever in 20 years told me the true reason they were afraid to fall in love again. She held his gaze. You told a total stranger in the first 10 minutes, and that's why I asked to sit down. I saw you across this room folding a sugar packet into eighths, dressed up for a woman who didn't come, and I thought that's a real one. I haven't seen a real one in years. Nathan didn't know what to say to that, so he said the honest thing, which was becoming a habit around her. I'm glad your date bailed, he said. Her eyebrows went up. That came out wrong, he said quickly. I mean, I'm sorry he was a jerk, but if he hadn't been, we wouldn't be. He gestured helplessly at the table, the cold coffees, the empty room. This is the best night I've had in a real long time, Evelyn, and I got stood up to get it. So, I'm glad, selfishly. Something moved across her face that he couldn't name. It might have been the vault opening just a crack. I'm glad too, she said quietly. The waitress finally came over, apologetic. I'm so sorry, folks, we close at 10 and it's... Nathan looked at his watch and startled. It's 10:15. I'm so sorry He was already reaching for his wallet. We kept you late, I'm sorry. You didn't keep me, the waitress said, and smiled at the two of them in a way that made Nathan suddenly unaccountably shy. Honestly, it was kind of nice. It was nice. Nathan put down 2 20s for 2 coffees and waved off the change, which was a small extravagance he'd feel in his budget on Thursday, and did not regret at all. He helped Evelyn with her chair, out of a reflex his mother had drilled into him, and she let him, and they walked out into the cold together. The parking lot was nearly empty. His truck sat under a flickering light, honest and battered. Some distance away at the curb, a black car idled, the kind of car with a driver in it, engine running, waiting. Nathan looked at it, then at her, and a small understanding began to form about exactly how large the rest of it might be. That yours? He asked, nodding at the car. Evelyn followed his gaze. Something guarded came back into her posture. Yes. Driver and everything. Nathan. It's okay. He put his hands up. You don't have to explain. You said just Evelyn for tonight, and it's still tonight, so. He smiled. You're just Evelyn who's got a real nice ride. The relief on her face was so raw it embarrassed him to have caused it. She wasn't used to this, he understood. She wasn't used to being let off the hook. She was used to the math starting the second people saw the car. They stood there a moment in the cold, neither one wanting to be the first to end it. This was... Evelyn started. Yeah, Nathan said. It was. I don't... She stopped. Recalibrated. For all her composure, for all her senators and football teams, she looked in that moment exactly as unsure as any person standing in a parking lot at 10:30, not knowing how to say goodbye. I don't do this. I want to be clear. I don't sit down at strangers' tables. I don't tell strangers the true reasons for anything. Tonight was an aberration. I want you to know that. Okay, Nathan said. So I don't quite know the protocol for what happens now. Nathan thought about it. He thought about Lily asleep at home with the sitter, about the truck with 190,000 miles, about the enormous idling car and the driver inside it, about the impossible arithmetic of a Navy man's $41,000 and whatever number Evelyn's life added up to. He thought about how every reasonable part of his brain was telling him this was a one-night miracle, a fluke, a beautiful thing that had happened once and could not happen twice. And that the smart move, the disciplined move, the move that protected an 8-year-old girl who'd already watched enough people leave, was to shake her hand, thank her for a lovely evening, and let her get in that black car and drive back into a world he'd never be able to follow her into. He thought about all of that, and then he heard Daniel's voice in his head. "That's the whole thing about you. You show up, every single time." "There's a cafe," Nathan said. "This one, I mean. It's Tuesday. I've got Tuesdays free lilies at her grandma's. Tuesday nights my mom takes her, gives me a break I never use." He swallowed. "I'll be here next Tuesday. Same time. 7 o'clock. Same table if I can get it." Evelyn went still. "I'm not asking you to come," Nathan said quickly. "I know how it sounds. I know what I am. And I've got a pretty good guess what you are. And those two things don't usually end up at the same cafe. So I'm not asking. I'm telling you where I'll be. In case." He shrugged, and it cost him something. That shrug, the pretending it didn't matter. In case just Evelyn ever wants a coffee with a guy who doesn't want anything from her. For a long moment she said nothing. The wind picked up. Somewhere the black car's engine hummed patient expensive, a whole other life waiting to reclaim her. "Next Tuesday," Evelyn said. "Next Tuesday. 7 o'clock. Same table," Nathan said. "If I can get it." She looked at him, really looked the way she'd looked at him when she was reading the ironed shirt and the missed spot on his jaw, and Nathan had the distinct feeling of being seen fully in a way he wasn't sure he'd been seen in years, maybe not since before the divorce, maybe not ever. "I make no promises," Evelyn said. "I'm not asking for any. My life is complicated, in ways you don't understand yet, in ways that might—" She stopped herself. "It's complicated." "Most good things are," Nathan said. "That's what my grandfather used to say. Anything worth having is complicated. Simple things are cheap." Evelyn let out a breath that fogged in the cold air. And she smiled, not the distant smile, not the businessman's smile, but the one that had shown up an hour ago and changed her whole face. "Your grandfather was a wise man." "He was a plumber," Nathan said. "But yeah, he was." She laughed again. And then, before he understood it was happening, she stepped forward and did something that clearly startled her, as much as it startled him. She reached out and briefly, lightly squeezed his forearm. Just for a second. Then she pulled her hand back like she'd touched a stove. "Good night, Nathan Cole," she said. "Good night, Evelyn." She turned and walked toward the black car. The driver was out before she reached it, opening the door. And just before she got in, she stopped and turned back. "For what it's worth," she called across the parking lot, "your daughter is very lucky." And then she was gone into the car. Into the dark, into the other life, and the taillights pulled away. And left Nathan Cole standing alone under a flickering light beside a truck with 190,000 miles on it, in his ironed blue shirt, that still smelled faintly of a Father's Day cologne his 8-year-old had picked out with her own money. He should have felt foolish. A part of him did the part that had done the arithmetic that knew what he was and what she was and how those numbers never balanced. But the bigger part of him driving home through the empty streets kept thinking about one thing. Not the coat, not the car, not the driver or the corner office with the view of 3 states. "You don't want anything from me." She'd said it like it was the rarest thing in the world. She'd said it like a woman dying of thirst, describing water. Nathan pulled into his driveway, killed the engine and sat there in the dark for a minute before he went in. Inside, the sitter reported that Lily had gone down easy, only 1 glass of water delay tactic, and Nathan paid her and thanked her and locked the door behind her. Then he went and stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, the way he did every night, and watched her sleep. Her stuffed animals were lined up on the shelf beside her bed. Tallest to shortest. Every one in its place. Order in a world that hadn't given her much. Nathan pulled her blanket up over her shoulder, and she stirred and murmured something that wasn't quite a word and settled again. "Night, baby," he whispered. He went to his own room and hung the ironed blue shirt back in the closet, and as he did, he caught himself doing something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember. He was thinking about next Tuesday, He didn't know, couldn't have known that 7 days from now, a woman worth $9 billion would sit down across from him again. That she'd do it a third time, and a fourth. That his daughter would one day organize a fifth stuffed animal by height because of her. That a photograph would eventually run in every newspaper in the country, under a headline that would turn his quiet life inside out. That he would have to choose before it was all over between the only kind of pride he'd ever known and the only kind of love he'd ever wanted. He didn't know any of that yet. Tonight, Nathan Cole only knew this, that he'd gotten dressed up to eat alone, that a stranger had asked to sit down, and that for 1 hour in a closing cafe, two of the loneliest people in America had forgotten they were lonely at all. He turned off the light. And for the first time in 3 years, Nathan Cole fell asleep smiling. He almost didn't go. Tuesday came the way Tuesdays do, gray and ordinary, and by 6 o'clock, Nathan Cole had talked himself out of the whole thing twice. He stood in his kitchen in his work clothes, phone in hand, and stared at the number he'd typed into his own head all week, 7 o'clock, same table, if I can get it, and thought about all the reasons a man his age should know better. "You're doing the thing again," Daniel said on the other end of the line. "What thing?" "The thing where you think yourself out of your own life." Daniel had called to check in the way he did, and Nathan had made the mistake of telling him about the woman named Evelyn. "You met a woman who sat down at your table and talked to you for 3 hours. 2. And made you feel like a human being for the first time since the divorce, and now you're standing in your kitchen finding reasons not to go see if she shows up. That thing." "She's not gonna show, Danny." "Then go find out." "She's out of my league. You should have seen the car. She had a driver. People with drivers don't come back to some diner to have coffee with a guy who—" "Nate," Daniel's voice cut through, "you show up. It's the only thing you know how to do. So go show up, and if she's not there, you're out $4 and a Tuesday night. But if she is there—" He let it hang. "You gonna let the car scare you off? You did 2 tours. You're scared of a Cadillac." Nathan looked at the clock. 6:14. "I hate that you're right about me," he said. "It's my only gift." He got there at 6:52. The same table by the window was open. He'd half hoped it wouldn't be, so he'd have an excuse, and he sat down in it and ordered a coffee he didn't want and watched the door. 7 came. The door didn't open. 7:04. A couple came in, not her. A couple came. 7:11. Nathan told himself he'd give it till 7:30, and then he'd go home and read Lily a chapter of the book they were on, and this would just be a nice thing that happened once, a story he'd tell himself when he was old, the night a beautiful stranger sat down and reminded him he was still a person. That would be enough. It would have to be. 7:19. He'd folded a sugar packet into eighths without noticing. At 7:23, the door opened and Evelyn walked in, and Nathan's whole chest did something complicated. She spotted him immediately, crossed the room, and sat down across from him with none of the hesitation from the week before. But her jaw was tight, and there was something coiled about her, and before he could even say hello, she said, "I want to apologize. I'm late." "You're here," Nathan said. "That's the part that counts. I nearly wasn't. I had a call run over. I had every reason to send my assistant to cancel." She set her clutch on the table with that chess piece precision he remembered. "And then I realized I didn't have a way to reach you. No number, no last well, no way. And I found myself in the back of a car telling my driver to break several traffic laws because the idea of you sitting here at this table thinking I'd stood you up was—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "It was intolerable to me, the image of it. So, I'm sorry I'm late." Nathan sat with that for a second. "You broke traffic laws," he said, "so I wouldn't feel stood up." "Yes." "By a stranger you met once." "Apparently." She looked almost annoyed at herself. "I've spent all week trying to understand it. I make decisions involving very large sums. Nathan and I make them without losing sleep. And I have lost sleep over a Navy man in an ironed shirt, and I do not know what to do about it." The waitress came, the same one from last week, and her face lit up when she saw the two of them. "You came back," she said, delighted. And Nathan realized she meant both of them, that she'd been wondering all week, too. "Coffee black?" she asked Evelyn. "You remembered." "You two were kind of the highlight of my month," the waitress admitted, and disappeared before either of them could be embarrassed about it. "So," Nathan said, "how was your week?" Evelyn with the driver. She almost smiled. "Exhausting. Yours?" "Lily got in trouble at school." That got her full attention. "What happened?" "There's a boy in her class, Marcus. Big kid mean streak, been picking on this little girl who's new, doesn't speak much English yet." Nathan turned his cup a quarter turn. "Lily told him to knock it off. He didn't. So my 8-year-old walked up to a kid twice her size and stepped between them and told him he'd have to go through her first." Evelyn's eyebrows rose. "Teacher called me in," Nathan went on. "Confrontational behavior. Wanted me to talk to her about using her words." He shook his head. "And I sat there in that little chair they make you sit in, and I'm supposed to be the responsible dad nodding along, and all I could think was, that's my girl. She used her words. Her words were, 'Go through me first.'" "What did you tell her?" Evelyn asked. "When you got home?" "I told her I was proud of her." Nathan met her eyes. "And then I told her that standing between a bully and somebody smaller is the bravest thing a person can do, and that she should always do it, and that I'd back her up every single time, but that next time maybe she could go get a teacher first so she doesn't get suspended, because Daddy needs her to graduate the 3rd grade. Evelyn laughed that surprised, escaped laugh he'd heard once before and had thought about all week. "She sounds," Evelyn said, "like the finest person I've never met." "She is." Nathan's face softened. "She really is. I was a bit like that," Evelyn said, and it came out before she seemed to decide to say it. "When I was small, I got in trouble there was a girl whose family couldn't afford lunch, and I started. I would take extra and leave it where she'd find it so she wouldn't have to ask. And a teacher decided I was stealing food and made an example of me in front of the whole class." She turned her own cup a quarter turn, unconsciously mirroring him. "I never told anyone why. I just took the punishment. I remember thinking if I explain it, they'll stop the girl from getting the food. So I let them call me a thief." Nathan stared at her. "That's the first time you've told me a true thing about being young," he said quietly. "I suppose it is." "Why'd you let them call you a thief?" Evelyn considered the question with the seriousness she seemed to bring to everything. "Because being called a thief cost me nothing I couldn't afford," she said finally. "And her going hungry cost her something she couldn't. Even at 8 I could do that math." Something crossed her face. "It's the same math your daughter did, isn't it? In front of the bully. What can I afford to lose, and what can't they?" "Yeah," Nathan said, and something warm and strange moved through him, the feeling of two puzzle pieces you didn't know were part of the same picture. "Yeah, that's exactly it." They looked at each other across the table for a moment too long. The waitress set down Evelyn's coffee and, sensing something, retreated without a word. That was the night the thing between them stopped being an accident and became a decision. Neither of them said so. But when Evelyn stood to leave 2 hours later, she took a pen from her clutch and wrote a number on a napkin and slid it across the table. "That's not the office," she said. "That's not my assistant. That's me. So that next time a call runs over, I can tell you I'll be late instead of leaving you here folding sugar packets." She paused. "Don't it would be best if you didn't give it to anyone. Or say where you got it." "I don't have anyone to give it to," Nathan said, folding the napkin into his shirt pocket, with a care that wasn't lost on her. "Next Tuesday. Next Tuesday." It became a rhythm. Every Tuesday, 7 o'clock, the table by the window. The waitress, her name was Gloria. They started saving it for them without being asked. And week by week, the vault Nathan had sensed in Evelyn that first night began slowly, and with great reluctance, to open. He learned things in pieces. That she'd built her company from a single idea in a rented room. That she'd been married once briefly in her 20s to a man who'd wanted the version of her that stayed home, and that she'd chosen the company. That she regretted almost nothing and one thing enormously, and wouldn't tell him yet what the one thing was. He learned that she was beneath the composure, funny, dry as a bone mean about the right people, and capable of making him laugh so hard he had to put his coffee down. She learned things too, that his mother lived 20 minutes away and took Lily on Tuesdays and had opinions about everything. That he'd wanted to be a mechanic before he'd joined the Navy, that he still fixed his own truck, that his hands knew engines the way some men's hands knew nothing. That he sang to Lily when she couldn't sleep badly on purpose because the badness made her laugh and the laughing made her sleepy. "Sing me one," Evelyn demanded 5 or 6 Tuesdays in. "Absolutely not. You sing to your daughter. You can sing to me. You're a grown woman with a driver, and I have never once in my life been sung to." She said it lightly, but there it was again, the thing underneath. Not once. Not by anyone. Nathan looked at her. And then quietly, absurdly, in a closing cafe over cold coffee, he sang her 8 bars of an old song his grandfather used to sing off-key on purpose, and Evelyn Hartwell. CEO, builder of empires, woman worth a number. Nathan still didn't know. Put her hand over her mouth and laughed, until her eyes went bright, and then the bright turned into something else, something that wasn't laughing at all. And she looked away out the window fast, so he wouldn't see it. That, she said when she'd composed herself, was genuinely terrible. "Told you. It was the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a decade." She was still looking out the window. "You have no idea. You have absolutely no idea, Nathan." "So tell me," he said. "The one thing you regret. You said there was one thing. Tell me." She was quiet for a long moment. "I never had a child," she said. "I told myself for 20 years it was a choice, that I'd chosen the company. And it was a choice right up until it wasn't one anymore, until my body made the choice for me. And I realized I'd been telling myself I was choosing, when really I'd just been putting it off, assuming there'd be time. There's always more time until suddenly there's a board meeting on the calendar for a Tuesday you thought was free." She looked back at him. "That's the one thing. I built something that will outlive me, and I have no one to leave it to who'll care that it was mine." Nathan didn't say he was sorry. He'd learned she hated that. He said the true thing instead. "You'd have been a hell of a mother." Evelyn's composure cracked just slightly at one corner. "You can't know that." "I can, actually." He leaned forward. "You know how I know, because you took the punishment for the hungry girl. Because you did the math at 8 years old about what you could afford to lose. That's the whole job, Evelyn. That's the entire job of being a parent, figuring out what you can afford to lose so your kid doesn't have to lose anything. You've had it in you the whole time. You just aimed it at a company instead of a person." She stared at him. For a second, he thought he'd gone too far. Then she said very quietly, "I would like to meet her. Your daughter. If only, if you thought it was wise. I understand entirely if you don't. She's the most important thing in your life, and I'm a woman you meet on Tuesdays, but I would like to. Someday. If." And that was the question, wasn't it? Because Nathan had a rule, and the rule was iron, and the rule was that no one met Lily. Not the woman from the base gym who'd flirted with him for a month. Not the divorced mom from Lily's school who'd made her interest clear. No one. Because Lily had watched one person walk out the front door, and Nathan had promised himself, swore it the way he swore oaths permanently, that she would never again get attached to someone who might leave. He'd known Evelyn Hartwell for 6 Tuesdays. By every rule he'd ever made, the answer was no. "Give me a little time," Nathan said. It's not about you. It's about her. She only gets so many people. I have to be careful who I—" "You don't have to explain," Evelyn said quickly. "Truly, that you'd even consider it is more than I—" She stopped. "Take all the time you need. She comes first. That's exactly as it should be." And the fact that she said that she put his daughter first without being asked, that she understood the rule, without needing it explained, was, Nathan would think later, the exact moment he stopped being able to pretend this was just coffee. Yeah, he introduced them a month later, and he did it the careful way, the way you'd introduce anything precious to anything unknown, slowly in daylight, in a public place with an escape hatch, the park, a Saturday. Nathan told Lily only that they were going to meet his friend, A lady he'd met that she was nice, that Lily didn't have to like her, and could tell Daddy anything she felt afterward, and Daddy would listen. He'd rehearsed a dozen ways for it to go wrong. Lily could be shy, could be cold, could sense the stakes and freeze up. Evelyn could be stiff, could talk to an 8-year-old like a shareholder, could be one of those adults who didn't know how to bend down to a child's level. None of the things he'd rehearsed for happened. What happened was that Evelyn Hartwell, worth $9 billion, got down on the ground in slacks that cost more than Nathan's monthly rent and asked Lily Cole a single question. "Your dad tells me you organize your animals by height. Show me how you'd rank these." And she produced from her bag a small handful of little carved wooden animals, a giraffe and an elephant and a mouse and a bear that she'd clearly bought for exactly this purpose. And Lily, who was cautious with strangers, who took her time, who did the math on people the way her father did, looked at the animals and then looked at Evelyn and made her decision on the spot. "You'd put the giraffe first," Lily said, taking the animals, "'cause he's tallest, but that's wrong." "Is it?" Evelyn said gravely. "You gotta measure the legs." Lily lined them up. "'Cause the bear's sitting down, but if he stood up, he'd be taller than the giraffe's neck, 'cause the neck doesn't count, it's just neck." She looked up. "Neck's not height. Neck's neck." Nathan watched Evelyn Hartwell receive this information with the total seriousness of a woman being briefed on a hostile takeover. "Neck is not height," Evelyn repeated. "I've been doing it wrong my entire life." "Most people do," Lily said, forgiving her. And that was it. That was the whole thing. Nathan stood there with his heart in his throat and watched his daughter, his careful, guarded, twice let down daughter, hand a wooden bear to a stranger and start explaining the proper theory of height. And he had to turn away for a second and look at the trees, because a father who'd learned to braid hair off a midnight video was not about to cry in a public park. They fed the ducks. Lily narrated the entire social hierarchy of the pond. Evelyn asked follow-up questions like it was the most important information she'd received all year, and Nathan slowly came to understand that she wasn't pretending that this was the same intensity she brought to everything. The same total attention only aimed now at a child, and that Lily could feel it the way kids can always feel when an adult is actually there and not just standing there. At one point, Lily ran ahead to look at a dog, and Evelyn came to stand beside Nathan, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "She's extraordinary," Evelyn said finally, and her voice wasn't quite steady. "Nathan, I understand now. Everything you said. I understand why you keep her so carefully. I'd guard her with my life, and I've known her for 40 minutes. "You did good," Nathan said. "With the animals. That was how'd you know to do that?" "I didn't know it would work. I only knew that if a child organizes her world by height, then height is the language, and if you want to talk to someone, you speak their language." She watched Lily crouch to greet the dog. "It's the same in business, actually. You find what someone loves, and you learn to speak it. I've never used it for something that mattered before." "This matters." Evelyn turned and looked at him. And the vault was all the way open now. No locks, no distance, nothing between them but the truth. "Nathan," she said, "I have been alone for 20 years and told myself it was the price of the life I wanted. And I have spent 6 Tuesdays with a Navy man and 1 Saturday with his daughter. And I am standing in a public park watching an 8-year-old explain ducks, and I have never in my life wanted anything the way I want to be allowed to keep doing this." Her voice dropped. "That terrifies me, because I know what I am, and I know what my life is, and I know that wanting things you can't keep is how people like me get destroyed. And I want it anyway. So yes, it matters. It's the only thing that's mattered in longer than I can say." Nathan didn't kiss her. Not there, not with Lily 30 feet away. But he took her hand, and she let him, and they stood there holding hands, watching his daughter make friends with a stranger's dog. And for a moment, the enormous gap between a $41,000 Navy salary and a $9 billion empire simply didn't exist, because there is no currency. For a moment like that, no exchange rate, nothing to convert. "Can she come to my birthday?" Lily asked on the drive home. Evelyn, can she? It's in 3 weeks and I want her to come. Nathan glanced in the rear view. You liked her, huh? She listens, Lily said with the devastating simplicity of a child. Most grown-ups pretend to listen. She actually does it. A pause. And she got the animals. But her theory of height is wrong, and I have to keep teaching her. Nathan laughed. Yeah, he said, and his voice was thick. Yeah, baby. She can come to your birthday. But the gap didn't disappear just because they wanted it to. It only went quiet for a while, and quiet is not the same as gone. Nathan started to notice things. Small things at first. The Tuesday Evelyn arrived 40 minutes late, apologizing, her phone lighting up on the table the entire time with a name he couldn't read. The Tuesday she took a call in the parking lot for 20 minutes while he waited and came back gray-faced saying only, "A situation. In Singapore. It's handled." The Tuesday she didn't come at all and texted him a single line, "Cannot make it. I'm so sorry. I'll explain." And Nathan sat at the table alone with Gloria, refilling his coffee and pretending not to notice, and understood for the first time viscerally that Evelyn's world could reach out at any moment and simply take her. "You're quiet tonight," Evelyn said the Tuesday after the one she'd missed. She'd come with an armful of apology and a story about a factory and a regulator and a deal that could have collapsed, and Nathan had listened, and it was all true, and none of it was the point. "I'm okay. You're not. You've folded that napkin into eighths." She reached across and gently took it from him and set it flat. "Talk to me. We tell each other true things. That's the entire thing we do. So tell me." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "Lily asked about you," he said. "This morning. She asked when she gets to see you again, and I said soon. And she asked if soon meant Tuesday, or soon meant real soon, and I didn't have an answer." He turned his cup. "And then she asked me something else, and I've been carrying it around all day, and I don't know what to do with it." "What did she ask?" Nathan met her eyes. "She asked if you were going to stay," he said. "Not in those words. She's 8, she doesn't. She asked, 'Does Evelyn have to go away a lot for her job?' And I said yes sometimes, and she got real quiet, and then she said—" His voice caught. He steadied it. "She said Mom had to go away a lot too, for her job." Evelyn went very still. "Her mother didn't have a job," Nathan said quietly. "Not really. Not one that took her away. That's the story Lily built at 5, because the truth was too big. She had to go for her job. It's how a kid makes it not her fault. And now she's watching a woman she's starting to love get pulled away by phone calls and Singapore and situations that get handled, and in her head—" He stopped. "In her head, Evelyn, I think she's starting to write the same story. Evelyn has to go for her job. And I swore to that little girl in my heart the day her mother left that I would never let her love someone who might—" He couldn't finish it. Evelyn's hands had gone white around her coffee cup. "I would never leave her," she said, and her voice was low and fierce and shaking. "Nathan, I would never—" "You wouldn't mean to," Nathan said, and it came out gentler than he felt. "That's the thing. Her mother didn't wake up one day and decide to break a 5-year-old's heart. The life got bigger than the love. That's how it happens. Nobody chooses it. The life just gets bigger one Singapore at a time until one day the phone rings during her birthday, and you take the call because you have to, because 10,000 people's jobs depend on you taking that call, and Lily watches you walk out to the parking lot, and something in her closes up, and it never opens again." He shook his head. "I've seen it happen to her once. I'd cut off my own arm before I'd watch it happen twice." The cafe was quiet around them. Gloria had gone to the back. It was just the two of them, and the thing that had been waiting under the surface for 6 weeks finally up in the light where they had to look at it. "So, what are you saying?" Evelyn said. Her composure was a wall now, but Nathan could see the cracks in it, could see how much it was costing her to hold. "Are you saying we stop? That I don't come? That this was lovely, and now it's over before it—" She stopped. Her jaw worked. Is that what you're saying to me, Nathan? No, Nathan said. Then what? I'm saying I'm scared. He put both his hands flat on the table the way he did when he needed to be honest and steady at the same time. I'm saying I met a woman on a Tuesday, and now she's in my daughter's birthday plans, and my kid is starting to write dangerous stories in her head, and I'm a disciplined man. Evelyn, I plan for everything and I don't have a plan for this. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying stop. God help me, I don't want to stop. He looked up at her. I'm saying I don't know how to do this without one of us getting hurt, and the one I care about getting hurt is 8 years old and organizes her animals by height, so the world will hold still, and I need you to understand what you're walking into before you walk any further into it. Because if you come to that birthday, Evelyn, if you come and she hands you a bigger piece of her heart, and then Singapore takes you... He shook his head slowly. I can't undo that for her. I've tried. You can't undo it. It just becomes part of who they are. For a long time, Evelyn said nothing. She looked down at her hands, at the cup, at the flattened napkin. And when she finally spoke, her voice was different, quieter, stripped of every wall, a voice Nathan had never heard from her, the voice of the 8-year-old who'd let them call her a thief. No one has ever, she said, asked me to choose them over the company. In 20 years, not my husband. He asked me to choose him, which is different, which is about his pride. No one has ever sat across from me and said, choose this child, choose showing up, choose being smaller so someone else can be safe. She looked up, and her eyes were wet, and she did not look away this time. And the terrible thing, Nathan, the thing I don't know how to say, is that no one has ever given me a reason to. Until now. Nathan's throat was tight. I don't know if I can do it, Evelyn said. I want to tell you I can. I want to tell you I'll always show up. I'll never take the call. Singapore can burn. But I built something enormous, and thousands of people depend on it. And I don't know how to just set it down. I don't know if I'm capable of it. I've never tried. A tear escaped. She let it. But I'll tell you what I do know. I know that I would rather try and fail at this than succeed at anything else I've ever done. And I know that if you let me come to that birthday, I will move heaven and earth and every board member on the planet to be their present phone off entirely, not as an apology, as a promise I intend to keep. She reached across the table and took his hand, hers cold and shaking around his. It's the only promise I've made in 20 years that I actually care whether I keep. Let me try to keep it. Please. Nathan looked at their hands on the table. He thought about Lily, about the story she was writing, about the front door and the person who'd walked out of it, about the rule iron and permanent that no one got attached to someone who might leave. And he thought about the truth he'd been circling for 6 Tuesdays, which was that the rule had already been broken. Lily was already attached. He was already attached. The choice wasn't whether to risk it. The choice was whether to face the risk together or alone. And Nathan Cole had spent 3 years doing everything alone. And he was so tired, God, he was tired of being the only one who showed up. The party's at 2, he said. 3 weeks from Saturday, at my mom's. There'll be juice boxes and a bounce house and 11 screaming children, and it is going to be the least glamorous afternoon of your entire life. Evelyn let out a breath that was half a laugh and half a sob. I'll be there at 1:30, she said, to help set up. You don't have to help set. I'll be there at 1:30, Evelyn said, to help set up. And it wasn't negotiable, Nathan understood. It was a woman planting a flag. Phone off, in the car, not on silent off. And if Singapore burns down, then it burns down, because I will be inflating a bounce house for an 8-year-old who thinks necks don't count as height, and there is nowhere on this earth I would rather be. Nathan laughed and it came out cracked, and Evelyn laughed too, and Gloria came out from the back to find the two of them holding hands across the table with wet faces and laughing, and she smiled and quietly turned the sign on the door to closed, even though it was only 9 o'clock, and left them there in the empty cafe to figure out the shape of the thing they were building. Outside, the black car idled at the curb, patient, waiting the other life, humming its engine in the dark. And for the first time when Evelyn stood to go to it, she looked at that car, The way a person looks at something they're no longer sure they want. She was there at 1:15. Nathan heard the car before he saw it. Not the black town car with the driver, but a different one. An SUV she'd driven herself, which he didn't know she owned or knew how to operate, and which turned out to be full of things. Streamers. A cake that hadn't come from a grocery store. 11 identical wrapped boxes because Evelyn had asked how many children would attend and then bought a small gift for every single one so that no child at Lily's party would have to watch another child open a present and feel the particular ache of being the one without. "You didn't have to do that," Nathan said, taking a box from her arms. "I did, actually." She was already surveying his mother's backyard, like a general assessing terrain. "I looked it up. Apparently, at this age, the non-birthday children experience the party as a referendum on whether they matter. This solves it. Everyone matters. Where do you want the bounce house?" His mother Carol came out the back door, drying her hands on a towel, and stopped dead at the sight of the woman in jeans. Nathan had never seen her in jeans, directing the placement of an inflatable castle. "So you're Evelyn," Carol said in the tone of a woman who had heard a great deal and reserved all judgment. "I am." Evelyn crossed the yard and put out her hand, and to Nathan's surprise, there was something almost nervous in it, this woman who was never nervous. "Mrs. Cole, thank you for having me. Nathan speaks of you constantly and always with terror, which I take to mean love." Carol's mouth twitched. "He's scared of me." "Good instinct." She looked Evelyn up and down. "You came early to help set up." "I did. Most of his lady friends over the years came late and left early." Carol said it plain the way she said everything. "The ones there weren't many. He's careful." "He's careful because of her," Evelyn said, nodding toward the house where Lily was, and Nathan watched his mother's whole posture change, watched the older woman recalibrate in real time. "And he should be. She's the finest child I've ever met, and I would rather cut off my own hand than be one more person who hurts her. So if you're taking my measure, Mrs. Cole, and you should be, you'd be a poor grandmother if you weren't. That's the measure. I know exactly what's at stake here. I don't take it lightly." Carol looked at her for a long moment. "Well," she said finally, "cake's in the kitchen and it needs candles. You know how to arrange 8 candles so a child doesn't set her own hair on fire?" "I'll learn," Evelyn said. "Come on then." And Carol turned and went inside, and Evelyn shot Nathan a look part terror, part triumph, and followed her, and Nathan stood in the backyard, holding a wrapped box, and thought that he had never in his life seen anyone win his mother over that fast, and that his mother had not in fact been won over, but had decided to allow the auditions to continue, which, from Carol Cole, was practically a marriage proposal. The party was chaos. It was exactly the least glamorous afternoon of Evelyn Hartwell's life, and she loved every second of it. 11 children detonated across the backyard. The bounce house became a war zone. Juice boxes were punctured, spilled, wept over and replaced. And in the middle of it, a billionaire CEO sat cross-legged on the grass, refereeing a dispute about whose turn it was to go down the slide with the same grave attention she'd give a merger, and the children who can smell a fake adult from 100 yards accepted her completely, because she wasn't faking, because she was actually there. Nathan watched her from across the yard, flipping burgers he'd never eat, and Daniel came up beside him with a beer and followed his gaze. "So that's her," Daniel said. "That's her. The billionaire." "Danny." "I'm just saying, you told me she runs a company. You did not tell me she runs—" Daniel had clearly done some research. "Nate, do you know what she's worth?" "No," Nathan said. "And I don't want to know." "You don't want to know." "No, man." Daniel took a long drink. "You're the only person on the planet who'd date a woman that rich and refuse to look up the number." "That's exactly why she likes me," Nathan said, and it wasn't a joke, and Daniel heard it wasn't and shut up. Later, after the cake, and the 8 candles arranged by a woman who'd never arranged candles before, after the presents, and the 11 small gifts that made 11 children feel they mattered. After the sugar crash and the goodbyes, and the last parent's minivan pulling out of the driveway, Nathan found Evelyn in the kitchen doing dishes. "You don't have to do that. I'm aware of what I do and don't have to do, Nathan, and I'm choosing to do this." She didn't turn around. "Your mother's watching me through the window over the sink to see if I'll actually finish or if I'll make an excuse and leave the last third for someone else. So I'm going to finish. Because I know how women like your mother take a person's measure, and it's not by the cake. It's by whether you do the dishes." Nathan leaned against the counter, smiling. "You've got her figured out. I've spent my life reading rooms. It's the one skill that transfers." She scrubbed a plate. "This is the best day I've had in longer than I can remember, and I inflated a bounce house and got frosting in my hair and refereed a slide dispute, and my phone has been off for 4 hours and the world did not end." She set the plate in the rack. "The world did not end, Nathan. I keep waiting for someone to tell me it ended. It didn't." "It's gonna be okay," Nathan said quietly, and for 3 weeks it was. 3 weeks of the world not ending. 3 weeks in which Evelyn Hartwell learned what a normal life felt like and discovered, to her own astonishment, that she wanted it more than she'd ever wanted a deal. She came to a Tuesday, and then a Saturday, and then recklessly joyfully, a plain Wednesday, just to see Lily's soccer practice standing on the sideline in the cold, in a coat that cost more than the other parents' cars cheering with a volume that startled everyone, including herself. She learned Lily's teacher's name. She learned that Lily's front tooth was loose and tracked its progress with genuine investment. She was there the night it finally came out. And she was the one who explained to a nervous Lily exactly how the Tooth Fairy's logistics worked, inventing on the spot an elaborate and internally consistent system involving regional distribution and a rewards program, until Lily was less scared of the gap in her mouth than fascinated by the supply chain. "You made the Tooth Fairy have a supply chain," Nathan said afterward, half laughing, half amazed. "Children respect systems," Evelyn said. "It's the disorganized magic they don't trust. Give it logistics, and they'll believe anything." And Nathan looked at her frosting long gone from her hair standing in his small kitchen, explaining Tooth Fairy logistics, and understood that he had fallen completely hopelessly in love with a woman worth $9 billion, and that the number had never once entered into it, and that this was either the best thing that had ever happened to him or a catastrophe waiting for its moment. It turned out to be both. The moment came on a Thursday. Nathan was under the truck when his phone started buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. Not one call, a cascade of them, and texts stacking up faster than he could read. He slid out from under the truck grease on his hands and saw Daniel's name 6 times, and a number he didn't know 4 times, and Evelyn's name once, and he opened Evelyn's first. "Don't look at the news. Call me, please, right now. E." He looked at the news. It took him about 10 seconds to find it because it was everywhere. A photograph, 2 photographs actually side by side. One was Evelyn, but not his. Evelyn, not the woman with frosting in her hair. This was the other one. The corner office one, crisp and untouchable in a magazine profile from 2 years ago, under a headline naming her as one of the most powerful women in the country. And worth there, it was the number he'd refused to look up. And it was even larger than Daniel had implied, large enough that Nathan's stomach dropped just reading it. The other photograph was of Nathan. It was grainy shot from a distance, clearly through a long lens. Nathan on the soccer sideline 3 Wednesdays ago in his old canvas jacket, and Evelyn beside him in her expensive coat, and between them, unmistakable, an 8-year-old girl in a soccer uniform. Lily's face wasn't fully visible, thank God, turned partly away. But she was there, in the frame, in the story. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO's Secret Life, the Navy Boyfriend and the Mystery Child." Nathan called her with shaking, grease-stained hands. "Nathan." She picked up on the first ring. "I am so sorry. Someone must have followed me. I should have been more careful. I know how to be careful, and I got happy, and I got sloppy, and now you and Lily are Nathan." "Is Lily okay? Does she know? Has anyone?" "She's at school." Nathan's voice was flat controlled, the voice he used when everything was on fire and someone had to not be on fire. She doesn't know. What is this, Evelyn? What is happening? It's the press. I've kept my private life sealed for 20 years. Nathan, there's never been a single photo, and now there's you. And her voice broke. There's her. In the frame. And they're calling her the mystery child. And I could kill someone, I could genuinely. Can they use her picture legally? Can they print my daughter's face? No. My lawyers are all ready. Her face is obscured in most of them, and where it isn't, we're getting it pulled. I have people on it. It will not spread. I promise you, it will not. She was breathing hard. Nathan, say something, please. You've gone quiet, and your quiet is worse than anyone else's shouting. Nathan stood in his driveway with grease on his hands and looked at the photograph of his daughter on the soccer field, taken by a stranger through a long lens, printed under a headline calling her a mystery, and felt something cold and old and protective rise up in him. The thing that had made an 8-year-old girl step between a bully and a smaller kid, the thing he'd given her, the thing his own father had given him. I have to go get her, he said. From school. Right now. Before this reaches the other parents, before some kid says something, before she hears the word mystery child from anybody but me. He was already walking to the truck. I have to be the one who explains it. Do you understand? Whatever else happens, I have to be the one. She's not going to learn about her own life from a headline. Yes, go. Of course. I'll Nathan. What can I tell me what to do? I'll do anything. Right now. He climbed into the truck. Right now I need you to handle your side and let me handle mine. That's the only thing that helps. You make the pictures of her face disappear and I'll take care of the little girl attached to it. He hung up before she could answer and drove to the school and signed Lily out early. And the whole way home, he tried to figure out how you explain to an 8-year-old that her private life was now a national headline, that the woman she was learning to love was more famous and more powerful and more complicated than anyone had let her know. He didn't have to figure it out in the end. Lily figured it out first, the way she figured everything out first. Daddy, she said from the back seat, why'd you pick me up early? Am I in trouble? No, baby, you're not in trouble. Is it Evelyn? And when Nathan's eyes shot to the rear view, Lily was watching him with that too old expression, the 8 going on 41. Marcus said his mom saw a picture of you and Evelyn on the internet, and that Evelyn is super rich, like $1 bazillion, and that you're her boyfriend now, and everybody was talking about it at recess. She paused. Is that true, the rich part? Nathan pulled the truck over. He couldn't have this conversation while driving. He put it in park on the shoulder and turned around to face his daughter. Yeah, he said. It's true. Evelyn has a lot of money. A whole lot. Lily absorbed this. Like a princess. Sort of. Except she made it herself. Nobody gave it to her. She built a big company from nothing when she was young, and she worked harder than just about anybody to do it. He watched her face. Does that change how you feel about her? Lily thought about it with tremendous seriousness. Does she still not know that necks aren't height? Lily asked. Nathan laughed. It burst out of him, half relief, half love. She still doesn't fully get it, no. You've got a lot of teaching left to do. Then it doesn't change anything, Lily decided. She's still Evelyn. She just has more money than I thought. A beat. Does that mean she can buy a bounce house for our actual house to keep? No, Nathan said. It does not mean that. But she could. Just because a person can buy a thing doesn't mean they should. Evelyn knows that better than anybody. It's part of why I like her. Lily accepted this philosophy. And then quieter, in a different voice, she asked the question that had been sitting under all the others. If she's a bazillionaire, why does she come to my soccer? Rich people don't go to kids' soccer. And there it was, the fear dressed up as a question. The same fear that had lived under everything since the day her mother walked out the door. Why would someone like that stay for someone like us? Because you matter to her, Nathan said, and he made his voice as steady and true as he'd ever made anything. The money's got nothing to do with it. She comes to your soccer because watching you play makes her happier than anything the money can buy. That's the whole reason. That's the only reason." Lily looked at him for a long moment, and then she nodded satisfied and looked out the window and said, "Okay, can we get McDonald's since I'm out of school early?" And Nathan laughed again and said yes, and pulled back onto the road, and for a little while it seemed like maybe it would be okay. Maybe the storm would pass over their heads without touching them. But the storm was only getting started. Because a headline like that doesn't just sit there. It grows. By that evening, there were follow-up pieces, and by the next morning, there were photographers, actual photographers. 2 of them parked down the street from Nathan's house in a car that didn't belong to the neighborhood. And Nathan had to walk Lily to the bus with his arm around her and his body between her and the lenses, and he had to explain to his commanding officer why there were reporters calling the base asking about a serviceman named Cole. And he had to sit Lily's teacher down and explain the situation so the school could protect her. And every single one of these conversations chipped away at something in him, at the careful private life he'd built brick by brick to keep his daughter safe. And Evelyn's world meanwhile went to war. He learned the shape of it in pieces over frantic phone calls because she couldn't come to the cafe anymore. Couldn't be seen with him now without a dozen lenses recording it. Her board was in an uproar. The story had raised questions. A CEO, with a secret, a lapse in judgment, a vulnerability. There were murmurs about her focus about whether a woman entering a serious relationship with a single father and a child was still fully committed to a company that demanded everything. Old rivals smelled blood. A faction on the board that had never wanted her there in the first place began quietly to move. "They're using it," Evelyn told him one night, her voice exhausted in a way he'd never heard. "The relationship. They're using you and Lily as evidence that I've lost focus. As if caring about a human being is a character flaw. As if the appropriate thing would have been to keep dying alone in a corner office, because that's what makes shareholders comfortable." A bitter laugh. 20 years I gave them. And the moment I want one true thing for myself, they treat it like a scandal. "You could deny it," Nathan said. "You could say I'm nobody, a misunderstanding. Kill the story. Protect yourself." He said it because he loved her, and because it was the exit, and he needed her to know he'd hold the door open if she wanted to walk through it. "I'd understand, Evelyn. Nobody would blame you. It's your whole life." There was a long silence on the line. "Is that what you want?" Evelyn asked quietly. "For me to say you're nobody. I want you to be okay. I want you to keep the thing you spent 20 years building. I don't want to be the reason you lose it." "You didn't answer my question." Nathan closed his eyes. "No," he admitted. "No, I don't want you to say I'm nobody. I want God help me, Evelyn. I want you to say the opposite. But I'm not going to ask you to burn your whole life down for a Navy guy and his kid. I've got no right to ask that." "You're not asking," Evelyn said. "That's the thing about you. You never ask. You just quietly hold the door open and let me choose every single time." Her voice thickened. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? Everyone in my life pushes me toward the deal, toward the exit, toward whatever serves them. And you just stand there holding a door open and trusting me to walk through the right one." A pause. "I'm not going to say you're nobody, Nathan. I'd sooner resign." Nathan's heart stopped it for a second. "Don't say that. I mean it more than I've meant anything." "Evelyn, don't make a decision like that in the middle of a war. That's how people lose everything. You don't blow up your life to win a fight." "And what if the fight is the thing showing me my life was already blown up?" she said. "What if I'm sitting here in a corner office worth more than some countries, and the only 3 weeks I felt alive in 20 years were spent inflating a bounce house and explaining tooth fairy logistics, and now these men want me to choose the office over the bounce house, and I'm looking at the choice, Nathan. I'm actually looking at it, and I don't want the office. You're tired. You're not thinking straight." "I have never thought more straight in my life." But the fight got worse before it got better, and it got worse in the exact way Nathan had feared most, the way that had nothing to do with boards or shareholders, and everything to do with a little girl. Because Evelyn, fighting for her professional life on 3 continents, started missing things. Not out of carelessness. Out of siege. A board that wanted her gone scheduled emergency meetings designed to test her, to force her to choose to make her prove her commitment by being everywhere at once. And so the Wednesday soccer practice came, and she wasn't there. And the Tuesday cafe was empty on her side. And the phone calls got shorter, more distracted, punctuated by other voices in the background, by one moment Nathan, by the sound of a woman being pulled in 10 directions, who could not, no matter how much she loved them, be in the one direction that mattered to an 8-year-old. And Lily noticed. Lily, who noticed everything. Lily, who organized her animals by height so the world would hold. Still watched the world start to move. "Is Evelyn coming to my recital?" Lily asked the night before. "She said she'd come. She promised. She said phone off and everything." "She's gonna try, baby. She's got a lot going on with her work right now." Lily got very quiet. And the next night at the recital, Evelyn's seat was empty. Nathan sat in the folding chair beside the empty one and watched his daughter come out on stage and scan the audience. Scan it once, twice, looking for a face that wasn't there. And he watched something in her small face close up, the exact thing he'd sworn would never close up again, and he wanted to burn the whole world down. Evelyn called that night wrecked. "I couldn't. The board moved the vote. They did it deliberately. They knew I had somewhere to be, and they—" "Nathan, I'm so sorry. Was she? How was she?" "She was looking for you," Nathan said, and he kept his voice level because shouting wouldn't help, and because he was too tired to shout. "The whole time she was on that stage, she was looking for you in the crowd." The silence on the line was total. And then, late that night, long after Evelyn's call, after Lily had gone to bed without asking for a story for the first time in a year, Nathan checked on her the way he did every night, standing in her doorway, and found her awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark. "Baby," he said softly. "You okay?" Lily didn't look at him. She kept staring at the ceiling. And when she finally spoke, her voice was small and flat, and it was the most frightened Nathan had ever been in his life. More frightened than any deployment, than any live fire exercise, than anything the Navy had ever thrown at him. "Daddy," Lily said, "is she going to leave like Mom did?" Nathan stood in the doorway, and for the first time in his life as a father, the one job he'd never once failed at, the one thing he'd always known how to do. Nathan Cole did not have an answer. Nathan crossed the dark room and sat down on the edge of her bed. "Come here," he said, and Lily sat up, and he pulled her into his chest, and he felt how small she still was. How much of her was still just a little girl, no matter how old her eyes got. "I asked you a question, Daddy." Her voice was muffled against his shirt. "You always answer my questions, even the hard ones. You said you'd always tell me the truth even when it's hard." She pulled back and looked at him. "So tell me the truth. Is she going to leave?" And Nathan understood that this was one of those moments that a child carries for the rest of her life, that whatever he said now, Lily would remember at 30, at 50, would replay in her own dark room someday. He could not lie to her. He'd built their whole life on not lying to her. But he could not promise her something that wasn't his to promise either, because a broken promise would be worse than any hard truth. "I'm going to tell you the truth," Nathan said. "The real one. Okay, even though it's complicated." Lily nodded. "I don't know," Nathan said. "That's the truth. I don't know if she's going to be able to stay the way we need her to. Her life is really, really big right now, and there are people trying to pull her away from us. And I don't know yet if she's strong enough to say no to them." He held her eyes. "But here's what I do know. And this is the important part, so I need you to really hear me. You ready?" "Ready. Whatever happens with Evelyn," Nathan said, "it will never ever be because of anything wrong with you. Do you understand me? When your mom left?" His voice caught, but he pushed through because she needed it more than she needed him to be composed. "When your mom left, that was never about you. Not for 1 second. You were 5 years old and perfect, and it was not your fault, and I need you to know that, because I don't think anybody ever told you that plain, and I should have told you 100 times. He wiped a tear off her cheek with his thumb. People leave for their own broken reasons. It's never because the kid wasn't good enough. You are the best thing I have ever done. You hear me? The best thing. And anybody who can't stay for you is the one who's losing something, not you. Lily was crying now quietly the way she did everything, and she pressed back into his chest. But I don't want her to be losing me, Lily whispered. I don't want her to leave and lose me. I want her to stay and have me. Why does everybody just leave Daddy? Why can't somebody just stay? And that question, that simple, devastating question from an 8-year-old in the dark, broke something open in Nathan Cole that had been sealed shut for 3 years. I don't know, baby, he said, and now his own voice cracked all the way through. I don't know why people leave, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay. I have always stayed, and I will always stay until I'm an old man and you're sick of me. That's a promise I can actually make because it's mine to make. Me, I'm not going anywhere, ever. I know that, Daddy. She said it like it was obvious, like it was the one fixed star in her sky. I've never worried about you. And somehow, that the total, unshakable faith in her voice, the fact that she had never once worried he would leave, undid him completely, and he held his daughter in the dark and let himself cry silently so she wouldn't hear, and Lily fell asleep in his arms mid-sentence, the way she used to when she was small. He laid her down, pulled up the blanket, looked at the shelf of animals, tallest to shortest, every one in its place. And then Nathan Cole went into the kitchen, and he called Evelyn Hartwell, and it was 2 a.m, and she answered on the first ring, because of course she did, and he said the hardest thing he had ever said in his life. We have to stop, Nathan said. The silence on the other end was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. Nathan, listen to me. Please. Just let me get through it, because if I stop, I won't be able to start again. He gripped the edge of the counter. My daughter is lying in her bed tonight asking me if you're going to leave like her mother did. She's 8, Evelyn. She's 8 years old, and she's already learned that the people you love disappear when their lives get big. And I swore that she'd never learn that lesson twice. And I'm watching it happen. I'm watching her sit on a stage, looking for your face in a crowd, and not finding it. And I'm watching something close up in her that took me 3 years to open, and I won't. I will not stand here and watch it happen in slow motion, because 2 grown-ups couldn't bear to end something that was already ending. It's not ending. Evelyn's voice was raw. Nathan, it's not the board vote is next week. Once it's over, There's always a next week. Nathan closed his eyes. That's the whole thing. Don't you see it? There's always one more vote, one more crisis, one more Singapore. I told you this at the very beginning. The life gets bigger, one emergency at a time, and nobody chooses it. And one day the phone rings during her birthday, and you take the call because 10,000 jobs depend on it. And that's not a villain's choice, Evelyn. That's just what your life is. And I love you too much to make you keep failing at something that isn't your fault. And I love her too much to keep letting her get hurt by it. He heard her crying now silently, the way Lily cried, the way he'd just cried, and it nearly killed him. So, this is you holding the door open? Evelyn said, her voice shaking. One more time. You're standing there, holding the door, and telling me to walk through it, and telling yourself it's for me, when really, Nathan, really, it's because you're terrified, and you'd rather end it clean than risk her getting hurt. I understand. I do. But don't you dare tell me this is for my sake. Have the courage to tell me it's because you're scared. Of course I'm scared. It came out louder than he meant, and he glanced toward Lily's room and lowered his voice fierce. Of course I'm scared. I'm terrified. I have been terrified since the night you sat down at my table, because I knew the math didn't work. I knew what you were and what I was, and I let myself fall anyway, because you made me feel like a person again, and I was selfish. And I let my daughter fall too, and now she's paying for it, and yes, I'm scared. I'm so scared I can't breathe. But being scared doesn't make me wrong. Both things can be true. I can be scared and right. And I'm telling you, as the person who knows that little girl better than anyone on this earth, she cannot survive another slow goodbye. So if it's going to end, let it end now, cleanly, before she gives you the last piece of her heart. That's the kindest thing left. That's the only kind thing left. There was a long, long silence. Is that really what you want? Evelyn asked, and her voice had changed, the wildness gone out of it, something quiet and terrible in its place. For me to go. Truly. If I hang up this phone and you never hear from me again, and Lily grows up and forgets me, and I go back to my office and my board and my $9 billion and my empty penthouse, is that the outcome you want? Answer me honestly, Nathan. You've never lied to me. Don't start now. Is that what you want? And Nathan Cole stood in his dark kitchen at 2 a.m, and he opened his mouth to say yes, because yes was the safe answer. Yes was the disciplined answer. Yes was the answer that protected his daughter behind a wall where no one could ever hurt her again. And he couldn't say it. No, he whispered. God, no. It's the last thing I want. Then why? Evelyn said, and she was crying again, but there was steel under it now. Are you asking me to do it? Because I don't know how to want you and protect her at the same time, Nathan said, and it was the truest thing he'd ever said, the thing at the very bottom of him. I don't know how to do both. I only know how to protect her. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. And you wanting you, it feels like the opposite of protecting her. Like every day I let you in is a day I'm gambling with the one thing I can't afford to lose. And what if, Evelyn said slowly, protecting her and having me aren't opposites? What if you've built your whole life on the idea that love is a risk you take against your daughter? When the truth is that the bravest thing you could show her, the single most important thing she could ever learn, is that love is worth staying for. That when it gets hard, you don't run. You don't end it clean to avoid the pain. You fight for it. What if the lesson she needs isn't people leave or trust no one, but this is what it looks like when two people refuse to give up on each other? Her voice broke. You want to protect her from watching someone leave, but Nathan, right now, tonight on this phone call, you're the one about to leave. You, not me. I'm not going anywhere. You're the one trying to walk out the door first so it can't hurt as much, and she'll learn that too. She'll learn it from you. Nathan stood frozen in the dark, because she was right. God help him, she was right, and he hadn't seen. It hadn't let himself see it, that the wall he'd built to protect Lily was the same wall that would teach her to run. That a father who ended things clean, to avoid the pain, was teaching his daughter to do exactly the same, and that the bravest thing, the thing that would actually save her, was the one thing his whole disciplined, self-protecting, battle-hardened soul had never learned how to do. To stay in the fight when the fight got hard, to let someone help carry it. I don't know how, Nathan said, and his voice was barely a voice at all. Neither do I, Evelyn said. Do you understand? I don't know how either. I've never done it. I ran from my marriage into my company because the company was safer than a person. I've spent 20 years choosing things I can control over people I can't. You're not the only one who built a wall, Nathan. Mine's just made of money instead of discipline. We're the same. That's why it works. That's why it's terrifying. A breath. So let's not know how together. Let's be two people who don't know how figuring it out instead of two people who ran, for her, and for us. Because I am done running. I decided it tonight, sitting in a board meeting that stole your daughter's recital from her watching those men congratulate themselves. I'm done. I don't want the thing they're fighting to make me keep. Evelyn. Don't hang up, she said. Whatever you do, don't hang up this phone. Because if you hang up, we both go back to our walls, and we both spend the rest of our lives safe and alone, and telling ourselves it was the responsible thing. And I would rather burn every dollar I have than watch us do that. A pause. Stay on the phone with me, Nathan. Just stay. Can you do that? Can you just stay on the phone until the sun comes up? Can we just not hang up? And Nathan Cole, who had spent 3 years being the only one who stayed, who had never once let anyone help him carry the weight, sat down slowly on his kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets and the phone pressed to his ear, and did the hardest and bravest thing he had ever done, which was nothing at all. Yeah, he said, I can stay on the phone. And they stayed. Two people who didn't know how on a phone line at 2 a.m, not solving anything, not fixing anything, just refusing for the first time in either of their lives to run. He didn't hear from her for 4 days after that night. It was the longest 4 days of his life. They hadn't broken up. The phone call had ended near dawn, with something unresolved, but alive with, "Don't hang up. Don't give up. Let me try to figure this out," with Evelyn saying, "Give me a week. Give me until the vote, and then I'll show you what I choose. I won't tell you. I'll show you." And Nathan had agreed because after a night on the kitchen floor, refusing to run, agreeing to wait was the least he could do. But 4 days of silence when the news was full of her was its own particular torture, because the news was very full of her. The board fight had gone public. There were stories every day now. Empire in turmoil. Board moves against founder. Is she losing her grip? Financial analysts on television speculating about her focus, her judgment, her recent personal distractions. And every time they said personal distractions, Nathan knew they meant him, meant Lily, meant a soccer sideline and a bounce house, and he wanted to put his fist through the screen. Daniel came over on the third night with a six-pack and sat with him in the garage. "You could call her," Daniel said. "She said give her a week. She said she'd show me, not tell me." Nathan turned a beer in his hands without drinking it. "So I'm giving her the week. It's the one thing she asked me for. In all these months, she never once asked me for anything. This is the first thing. I'm not going to fail it. And if the week ends and she chooses the company?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Then she chooses the company," he said. "And I'll have learned something I didn't want to learn. And Lily and I will be okay, because we were okay before, and we'll be okay after. But," he set the beer down, "I don't think she's going to choose the company, Danny. And that scares me almost more than if she did. Because if she gives it all up, $9 billion, 20 years, the whole thing, if she gives it up for us, then it's real and it's on me and Lily to be worth it forever. And that's," he shook his head. "How do you be worth that? How does anybody be worth somebody burning down their whole life?" "Maybe that's the wrong way to think about it," Daniel said. "Maybe she's not burning it down for you. Maybe she's putting out a fire she should have put out years ago and you just gave her the reason to finally do it." He clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "You keep thinking you're a debt she's paying. You ever think maybe you're the first thing in 20 years that made her want to stop paying everybody else?" Nathan didn't have an answer for that. The 7th day was a Saturday. Nathan had told himself he wouldn't watch the news, and then he'd watched it anyway all morning, because the board vote was that day, and the whole financial world was waiting to see whether Evelyn Hartwell would survive it. By noon, there was nothing. By 2, still nothing, just analysts speculating cameras outside a building, the machinery of a story with no ending yet. At 3 o'clock, Lily, who had been subdued all week, who hadn't asked about Evelyn once, which was worse than if she'd asked, constantly came into the living room and stood in front of the television. "Is that where Evelyn works?" she asked, looking at the building on the screen. "Yeah, baby, that's it." "Is she in trouble?" Nathan turned off the TV. "Some grown-ups are trying to take her company away from her. Today's the day they find out if they can." Lily absorbed this. "Do you think she's scared?" "I think," Nathan said carefully, "she's probably very scared. But I think she's also very brave. Braver than those men know." Lily nodded slowly, and Nathan thought that was the end of it. And then his daughter said something that stopped his heart. "I hope she wins," Lily said quietly. "Even if she can't come back to us. I hope she still wins, because she's my friend, and I want good things for her even if I don't get to keep her." And then she walked back to her room, an 8-year-old who had just demonstrated more grace than most adults manage in a lifetime, and Nathan sat alone in the quiet living room and had to put his face in his hands. At 4 o'clock the doorbell rang. Nathan almost didn't answer it. He'd been dodging reporters all week, but through the window he didn't see a camera. He saw an SUV in the driveway, the one she drove herself, and he crossed the room and opened the door, and there stood Evelyn Hartwell. She looked exhausted. She looked like she'd aged a year in a week. But she was standing on his doorstep in the late afternoon light, and she was smiling a small, wrecked, real smile, and in her hand she was holding a manila folder. "You didn't call," Nathan said stupidly because his brain had gone blank at the sight of her. "You told me to show you, not tell you." She held up the folder. "So I came to show you." "The vote the board, what happened, did you?" "May I come in?" she asked. "It's a long story, and I'd rather tell it sitting down, and I'd very much like to tell part of it to Lily if that's all right. If she'll see me." Her voice caught on the "if she'll see me," and Nathan understood how frightened she was, this woman, who was never frightened, standing on his doorstep, not knowing if the little girl inside would still open her arms. "Lily!" Nathan called, not taking his eyes off Evelyn. "Baby, come here. There's someone at the door." He heard the bedroom door and then footsteps, and then Lily appeared in the hallway, and she saw who it was. And for one terrible second she just stood there, frozen, her small face working through something enormous. And then Lily ran flat out full speed across the living room and threw herself at Evelyn. And Evelyn. Hartwell dropped the manila folder on the doorstep and caught her, went down on her knees, right there in the doorway, and caught the little girl and held on. And Lily was crying and saying, "You came back! You came back! Everybody said you might not come back, but you came back." And Evelyn was holding her and saying, "I came back! I'm here! I came back! I'm so sorry I missed your recital! I'm so sorry!" And Nathan stood there in his own doorway, watching the two of them, and could not have spoken if his life depended on it. When they finally came apart, Evelyn's face was wet and her careful composure was gone completely. And she'd never once in all these months looked more like a person and less like a CEO. "I have to talk to your dad about something important," she told Lily, wiping her eyes. "Grown-up boring things. But then if it's okay with him, I would very much like to stay for dinner. And I would like you to teach me one more time the correct theory of height. Because I've been thinking about it all week, and I still don't fully understand about necks." "Necks aren't height," Lily said immediately through her tears, delighted to have her student back. "It's the legs, I keep telling you." "The legs," Evelyn repeated solemnly. "I'll get it eventually. You're a patient teacher." Lily beamed, and at Nathan's gentle nudge went to go set out plates for a dinner that wasn't cooked yet, buzzing with a joy that filled the whole house, and Nathan and Evelyn were left standing in the doorway, with the manila folder on the ground between them. Nathan bent and picked it up. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it." He opened it. Inside were documents, dense legal official looking, and it took him a moment to parse what he was reading, and when he did, he looked up at her, unable to speak. "You didn't," he said. "I did." "Evelyn, this is—" He looked back down at the papers, at the words that were rearranging his entire understanding of the last week. "Tell me what this is. In plain English, tell me what you did." And Evelyn Hartwell, standing in the doorway of a small house belonging to a Navy man who made $41,000 a year, took a breath and told him. "I resigned," Evelyn said. Nathan stared at her. "You what?" "This morning, before the vote, I walked into that boardroom, the one full of men who'd spent a week trying to prove I'd lost my focus, and I stood at the head of the table and I told them they were right." Her voice was steady now, steadier than he'd ever heard it. "I told them I had in fact lost my focus. That for 20 years my focus had been on the wrong thing entirely. And then I handed them my resignation, effective immediately, and I named my own successor before they could name theirs, and I walked out of that building for the last time as a private citizen." She nodded at the folder in his hands. "That's the paperwork. It's done, Nathan. It's already done. There's no vote to wait for. There's no next week. I ended it myself on my own terms before they could take it from me." Nathan looked down at the papers, then back at her, and his mind was racing to catch up to what she was telling him. "Evelyn, that company was your whole life. 20 years. You built it from nothing. You can't just—" "I didn't just—" She stepped closer into the doorway, lowering her voice so Lily wouldn't hear from the kitchen. "I want you to understand something because I know you and I know that right this second you're doing the math, you're calculating how much I gave up, and you're terrified that you and Lily could never be worth it, and you're about to start building a wall out of guilt." She put her hand flat on his chest. Stop. Listen to me. I didn't give up my life for you. I got my life back. Do you understand the difference? Those men in that room weren't fighting to protect something I loved. They were fighting to keep me chained to something that stopped loving me back a long time ago. The company was never going to hold my hand when I'm old. The company was never going to explain the Tooth Fairy's supply chain to a child. The company was a beautiful, enormous cage, and I built it myself brick by brick, and I've been sitting in it for 20 years telling myself the view was the point. She shook her head. You didn't cost me my life, Nathan. You showed me I'd been living in a cage. There's a difference, and I need you to hear it, because I'm not going to spend the rest of my days with a man who thinks I'm a sacrifice he has to earn. Nathan's throat was too tight to speak for a moment. What are you gonna do? He finally managed. You can't. Just a person like you doesn't just stop. You'll go crazy inside a month. At that, Evelyn smiled, and it was a different smile than any he'd seen, brighter, freer, almost young. I'm not stopping, she said. I'm starting something new. Turn to the second page. He turned the page, and there, in the same dense legal language, was a second document, and this one made his breath catch even harder than the first. A foundation, he read slowly. He looked up. You started a foundation. I'm funding it myself. A very large portion of what I have, the portion I don't need to live simply for the rest of my life, which turns out to be almost all of it, because it turns out one person needs shockingly little. She was talking faster now, lit up, and Nathan realized he was watching Evelyn Hartwell excited about something for the first time. It's for single parents, for families in crisis, for the Nathan Coles of the world, the man working himself to exhaustion, making $41,000, learning to braid hair off a video at midnight, because his daughter's dignity matters more than his sleep. Do you have any idea how many of him there are? Millions. Millions of parents doing it alone, one paycheck from disaster, invisible to every system built by people like the ones I just resigned in front of. Her eyes were bright. I spent 20 years learning exactly how money and power move through the world. I know how to build things. I know how to make an organization run, and I have finally found something worth building it for. Not an empire that outlives me and belongs to no one. A thing that catches people before they fall. That's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, Nathan. And I didn't do it for image, and I didn't do it for damage control, and I didn't do it to win you. She took the folder gently from his hands and set it on the side table. I did it because you made me remember I was a person who once took the punishment so a hungry girl could eat. I lost that girl somewhere in 20 years of boardrooms. You gave her back to me. So this? She gestured at the folder. This is her. This is me being her again. Finally. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. And then, because there was nothing else to do, because every wall he'd built had just been quietly dismantled by a woman who'd dismantled her own. To do it, he reached out and pulled her into his chest and held her, and Evelyn Hartwell, who had held herself apart from the world for 20 years, let herself be held. You should have called me, he said into her hair. I spent 4 days thinking you were going to choose the company. I told you I'd show you, not tell you. She pulled back and looked up at him. Words are cheap, Nathan. You taught me that actually the very first night when you said people always say they'd give it all up and never do. So I wasn't going to say it. I was going to do it and then stand in your doorway with the proof in my hand so that you would never, ever have to wonder whether I meant it. She reached up and touched his face. I'm not a woman who says she'll stay. I'm a woman who resigns from a $9 billion company on a Tuesday and shows up on your doorstep on a Saturday. That's the only kind of staying I know how to do, the kind you can hold in your hand. From the kitchen, Lily's voice rang out, impatient and delighted. Are you guys done being boring yet? I set the plates. There's nothing to eat, but I set the plates. And Evelyn still has to learn about necks. Evelyn laughed, the real one, the escaped one. The one Nathan had fallen in love with in a closing cafe a lifetime ago, and wiped her eyes. "We're coming," Nathan called, and then quieter to Evelyn. "You sure about this?" "All of it, because there's no undo button on a family. You come in here, you sit at that table, you let her keep teaching you about necks. There's no walking it back. She's already given you the last piece of her heart. You saw her run at you just now. There's nothing held back anymore, so I need you to be sure." Evelyn looked at him, and there was no vault left in her, no distance, no locked door, just a woman standing all the way in the open. "Nathan Cole," she said, "I have never been more sure of anything in my life, and I've made billion-dollar decisions with less certainty than I feel standing in this doorway." She took his hand. "Take me to dinner, even if there's nothing to eat, especially if there's nothing to eat. I'll learn to cook. I'll learn everything. I've got the rest of my life and nowhere else I'm supposed to be for the first time since I was 23. A pause, and her voice went soft. "Do you know what that feels like? To have nowhere else you're supposed to be?" I'd forgotten. I'd completely forgotten. And Nathan Cole led Evelyn Hartwell into his small kitchen, where an 8-year-old was standing guard over a table set with empty plates, and the three of them figured out dinner together. Nathan cooking, Evelyn chopping vegetables badly, and being lovingly corrected by Lily, who had opinions about knife technique she'd absorbed from her father, and it was loud, and it was imperfect, and it was the least glamorous evening of Evelyn's entire life, and she would remember it until the day she died, as the night her real life began. Tishtor said. The storm didn't end overnight. Storms never do. The news, having built Evelyn up as a titan, took its turn tearing at her fall. Billionaire walks away. Madness or masterstroke. What really happened in the boardroom? For a few weeks, the photographers lingered hungry for the next chapter, and Nathan learned to walk Lily to the bus with his body between her and the lenses, and he learned to say no comment without heat. And slowly, when they realized that the great scandal had resolved itself into the profoundly boring image of a former CEO learning to make spaghetti in a small kitchen, the cameras drifted away to find a fresher wound, because there was no scandal left to feed on. That was the thing the tabloids couldn't metabolize. They'd wanted a story about a gold-digging Navy man and a CEO losing her mind, and what they got instead was a woman quietly starting a foundation and coming to soccer practice, a man who refused every interview and every payday they dangled, and a little girl who organized her animals by height. There was no villain. There was no fall. There was just a family forming in real time out of two people who had spent their whole lives certain that families like this one were for other people. The foundation launched 3 months later. Evelyn insisted on doing it without fanfare, which drove her new team crazy. They wanted a gala, a red carpet, a spectacle. She wanted a Tuesday. She wanted to open the doors and start helping people and let the work speak. The first family they helped was a single father of 2 who was about to lose his apartment. Evelyn drove to meet him herself. No assistant, no press, and sat at his kitchen table the way Nathan had once sat at a cafe table and listened to him the way she'd learned to listen, and then quietly made his crisis disappear. She came home that night and cried, and when Nathan asked why, she said, "Because I spent 20 years feeling important, and I never once felt useful. And today I felt useful. And it turns out useful is the thing I was starving for the entire time." She and Nathan didn't rush. That surprised people, the ones who assumed a billionaire and a Navy man would move fast, would marry in a flash, would merge their impossible worlds overnight. They didn't. Evelyn kept her own place. At first a modest one, smaller than anything she'd lived in since her 20s, and she came to dinner most nights and to every soccer game and every recital, phone off, present entirely. She learned Lily's whole world, her friends, her fears, the exact way she liked her sandwiches cut. She learned that the tooth on the other side had come loose and required a whole new logistics briefing. She learned to braid hair taught by Nathan, who was by now genuinely excellent at it. And the first time Evelyn managed a passable French braid on Lily's head before school, she photographed it from 4 angles like it was a merger she'd closed. And Nathan slowly learned the thing he'd never learned in the Navy, the thing his whole disciplined life had armored him against. He learned to let someone help him carry it. It came hard. The first time Evelyn quietly paid for a car repair he'd been dreading, he nearly gave it back, the old pride flaring up the terror of being a man who took charity from a rich woman. And Evelyn, who understood him better than anyone alive by now, didn't argue. She just said, "Nathan, when Lily fell off her bike last month and skinned her knee and you cleaned it and bandaged it, did she owe you for that? Did you keep a ledger?" "Course not, she's my kid. And when your mother watches Lily on Tuesdays, does she bill you? That's different. That's family." "Yes," Evelyn said. "It is. That's exactly my point." And she'd let it sit there, and Nathan had understood slowly that letting someone love you, letting someone help, wasn't weakness and wasn't debt. It was just what family was. It was the thing he'd been giving Lily her whole life and never once let himself receive. And learning to receive it at 34 from a woman who'd had to give up $9 billion to learn how to give it, that was the hardest battle Nathan Cole ever fought, and the one he was proudest of winning. "You know what I figured out?" he told Daniel one night a year on the two of them in the garage the way they always ended up. "The Navy taught me how to endure anything. Take any hit, carry any weight, never break, never ask for help. 20 years I thought that was the whole game. Endurance. And it's not. It's not." Nathan turned a wrench over in his hands. Some battles aren't about endurance. Some battles you win by finally letting somebody stand next to you. By not doing it alone. Turns out that's the harder thing. I could endure anything. What I couldn't do was let somebody in. She had to teach me. A woman who'd never let anybody in either. We taught each other. He set the wrench down. Two people who spent their whole lives building walls, and it turned out the bravest thing either of us ever did was let the other one over. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know I set up that blind date, right? The one that fell through. The one that put you in that cafe that night." "I'm aware, Danny. You remind me every chance you get. I'm just saying, you should probably name your first kid after me." "Absolutely not." "Middle name?" "No." "A pet then. A dog." "Daniel." Nathan laughed, and it was the easy laugh of a man whose life had room in it. Now room he'd never had before. Room a woman had walked into on a cold Tuesday night and never left. They married 18 months after the cafe. It was small Evelyn, who could have bought any wedding on earth. Wanted the backyard, the same backyard where she'd once inflated a bounce house and won over Carol Cole by doing the dishes. 50 people. Carol cried and pretended she wasn't. Daniel gave a speech that started as a joke and ended with him unable to finish because he was crying too. And Lily. Lily walked Evelyn down the makeshift aisle, because when Nathan had asked his daughter who should give Evelyn away, since Evelyn had no family of her own, to do it, Lily had said with total 9-year-old authority, "I will. She's mine. I found her first. At the park. With the animals." And no one had argued because it was true. At the reception, Lily gave a toast. She was 9 now, still reading 3 grade levels up, still organizing her animals by height, and she stood on a chair so people could see her and held a glass of sparkling apple juice and said, "I used to be scared that Evelyn would leave, like my other mom did." The backyard went very quiet. I asked my dad one time if she was going to leave, and he said he didn't know, and that was the scariest night ever. She looked at Evelyn. But then she came back. Everybody said she might not, but she did. And she gave up a whole company and $1 bazillion, and my dad kept saying she was giving up so much, but I don't think she was. I think she was just coming home. She just didn't have a home before, and then she found ours, and now it's hers too. Lily raised her glass. "So this is my toast to Evelyn, who came back, and who still doesn't totally understand about next, but that's okay because now she has forever to learn." And the backyard dissolved. There wasn't a dry eye in it. Carol, openly weeping. Now Daniel. A mess. Nathan with his arm around Evelyn, and both of them undone, and Evelyn climbed up on the chair beside her new daughter, and pulled her into her side, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "For the record, I have finally learned about necks. It's the legs. She's an excellent teacher. It only took me 2 years." And everyone laughed through their tears, and Lily beamed like she'd closed the most important deal of her life, which in a way she had. Tetsuben. Years passed the way years do. The foundation grew into something that helped thousands, then tens of thousands of families. The invisible parents, the ones a paycheck from disaster caught now before they fell by an organization run by a woman who knew exactly what it was to be starving for something money couldn't buy. Evelyn never went back to the empire. She never once regretted leaving it. On the rare occasion a reporter asked whether she missed the power, she'd say the same thing every time: "I have more power now than I ever had. I just finally pointed it at something that mattered." And she'd change the subject to whatever family the foundation was helping that week, because the empire bored her, now genuinely bored her, and the families never did. Nathan stayed in the Navy until his time was done, and then he did the thing he'd wanted to do at 18 before life took him a different way. He opened a small garage, worked with his hands fixed. Engines came home every night smelling of honest work and greeting a house that was full instead of empty. He never let Evelyn's money change who he was. He never once ate off it, never let it soften him into a man he wouldn't recognize. He kept the truck with 190,000 miles until it finally died at 240, and he mourned it like a friend. Lily grew up. She grew up the way you hope a child grows up when she's loved right. Steady and brave and generous. Still the girl who'd stepped between a bully and a smaller kid, still doing the math on what she could afford to lose so that someone else wouldn't have to lose anything. She never forgot the lesson of that dark night when she'd asked her father if Evelyn would leave. But the lesson she carried wasn't the one Nathan had feared she'd learn. It wasn't "people leave." It was the opposite. It was the one Evelyn had fought for on a 2 a.m. phone call, that love is worth staying for, that when it gets hard, you don't run. That the bravest thing two people can do is refuse to give up on each other. She'd watched her father learn to let someone help him. She'd watched a billionaire walk away from an empire and call it coming home. She grew up knowing in her bones what it looks like when people choose each other, not once in a grand gesture, but daily, in 10,000 small, unglamorous acts of showing up. And when Lily was grown and someone asked her once what her family was like, she thought about it with the same seriousness she'd once brought to the theory of height. And she said, "My family isn't perfect. We're not one of those families that has it all figured out. My dad's stubborn, and my mom, my second mom, the one who chose me. She still works too much. We have to drag her away from the foundation sometimes. We fight. We mess up. But we show up. Every single day, no matter what, everybody shows up. That's the whole thing. That's what makes us a family. Not that we're perfect. That we're present." Nathan Cole lived a long life, and it was full, and it was loud, and it was the exact opposite of the quiet, dutiful, lonely survival he'd resigned himself to on a cold Tuesday night in a closing cafe. He grew old, and his hand was held when he was old exactly the way Evelyn had promised him it would be in that very first conversation, when she'd told a stranger there wasn't enough money in the world to buy what he had. She'd been right. There wasn't. And in the end, she hadn't tried to buy it. She'd given up everything she had to simply be worthy of it, and then she'd spent the rest of her life earning it day after ordinary day. But that was all still ahead of them. On the night it all began to become real, the night Evelyn stood in his doorway with a manila folder and a resignation and a foundation and her whole heart in her hands, Nathan Cole sat down at his small kitchen table between the two people he loved most in the world, in a house that was warm and loud and full, and looked at the empty plates his daughter had so proudly set, and the woman who'd given up an empire to fill the chair across from him. And he understood all at once the thing he'd been missing for 3 long, lonely years. He wasn't eating alone. He would never eat alone again. And Nathan Cole. Navy man. Single father. A man who'd once gotten dressed up to sit by himself at a table for two reached out and took the hands of his daughter and the woman who'd chosen them. And they bowed their heads, and he said, "Grace over a dinner that wasn't even cooked yet." And his voice did not shake, because for the first time in his entire life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the people he was supposed to be with. And nothing in the world was ever going to make him lonely again. The table was full. The family was real. And that was the truth that no headline could touch, no board could vote on, and no amount of money could ever have bought. They had built it themselves, brick by brick, day by day, showing up. And it would never disappear.